Punching on screen. Let's have a look at the procedures and structures on how to build a punch on screen. But first and most importantly, let's talk about safety. When we punch on screen, we usually do not connect. There is opportunities to connect on screen as well, but it's usually when we shoot slow motion and the punches are not performed with any kind of real intensity. When we're shooting action with intensity, then we gotta make sure we have a safety gap, which means between the punch and the target, which is usually another person, we wanna make sure that there is no connection whatsoever. We call that the gap. So we're gonna make sure that we have a gap between, let's say, our fist or our elbow and our partner's face usually. So how are we gonna stage that? First, let's work out the safety distance. A good way to work out your safety distance is to put some markings on the ground, which we have done down here. So they're the markings for my partner, and these are my markings here. And then we're gonna check if these markings are correct by extending our arms at its fullest, where I can connect with my hand to my partner's face, and then making sure that my partner is another foot away from that. So there's a significant gap between my strike and my partner's face. And then what sells the punch is the intensity that I throw the punch with, as well as my partner's reaction. That's probably the most important part of selling a punch. If my partner doesn't react well to my punch, if they're a little bit too slow, or if they're too fast compared to the intensity of my punch, we will not get the idea that the punch was real. So it will not be convincing. So we gotta make sure that the speed of my punch and the reaction of my partners match. So if I throw too slow and he reacts too fast, or if I throw too fast and he reacts too slow, we will not see on screen the punch and the reaction as being convincing. So let's have a look, let's stage it. Let's bring Warren in from behind the camera. So, my partner is on his marks, I'm on my marks, and right here in this camera, because the camera is two-dimensional, we can't actually see if I can touch my partner or not. It feels like right here that I can touch my partner. So if I was swinging my hand through his face now, it would look like I'm striking and connecting. But on this camera over here, as well as on this one over here, we see that there is a significant gap. My fist can actually never reach my partner's face. So what sells it now is my partner's reaction once again, and the right reaction. So let's look just at a simple basic reaction to a swing punch. So it means I'm gonna swing right through partner's face and across the lens, and partner is gonna react to it. The way we react is, you as the partner who is reacting, you wanna make sure that you wait until the punch passes your center line, which is usually past your nose. So once the punch is past the nose, that's when my partner will react. We're gonna start slow, a couple of times, and then speed it up to a speed where the punch is gonna look real. So the first one is what we call at half speed, quite slow, so partner can practice the timing of their reaction to my punch. So I now know I have a safety gap, I have a safety distance, and I now know that I can throw this punch and my partner will react correctly. So I'm always gonna talk to my partner first and see if he's set and ready to go to try and rehearse. So are you set?
Set.
Let's rehearse. We're gonna rehearse this at half speed. So pull the punch up, I'm slowly throwing across partner's face and through the lens. So I'm gonna try that one more time at the same speed. Half speed, throwing the punch, and partner reacts. So now we're gonna try and throw that punch at full speed. I'm gonna look at my partner. And one more time. And as you can tell from these two cameras here, there is a safety gap, and what's selling it is my partner's reaction. But now, since I don't see partner's face, I only see his reaction. In this angle, it's important for me to also give some intensity to the punch. So if I'm totally blasé about it, so if I'm just kind of like, oh, I'm gonna throw a punch, it's not gonna look very believable because there's no intensity in my face that I'm just about to throw a punch. But that's where the acting part comes in throwing a punch. But if I am vocal, or if at least I give my face some anger, the emotion of anger, then we definitely know that punch is coming. So even if I'm not vocal, but I said the emotion in my face changes that I'm about to throw a punch, it gives also my partner a good idea that I'm just about to throw as well. So they're ready to go for that punch. So I might be totally relaxed, and then getting angry, and then pulling the punch through, which then makes it really believable because there was an emotion behind the punch and it's not just an action for the action's sake. So making sure that we have emotion before the action happens, it's just as important as the action. So that is what sells the punch. Now, you always want to record not just the hero throwing the punch, but also the person receiving the punch. So all we're going to do is we're going to shuffle around here. We're going to make sure now that Warren is going to show his reaction to the camera. So the camera is not off his shoulder, which is behind him, but it's going to be in front of him. So we're going to change the positions. And so right now, when I turn around, you won't see my face, you only see Warren's. But now we're going to see how he sells the reaction, how he sells the punch. Since we now change positions, we're going to check the safety gap again first. I'm going to be standing here. I want to make sure that I can't touch my partner and I'm far away from my partner, which we can see in these other angles again. We can see that the camera is off my shoulder. And since it's off my shoulder, we can see Warren is set in full screen. Now we're going to go again at half speed first, just to see how we sell that reaction, which means my fist now has to come all the way across his face. It cannot lift half down his face. It has to be on the other side first. So as I'm coming through screen with my fist, then I make sure that I'm going and crossing his face all the way. And as my fist is going past his center line, that's where he's going to start his reaction. So one more time in half speed. And now full speed. One more time. On this lens here, we are quite tight, when on the other lenses, we are quite wide. When you're in a tight lens, it means also that your reaction has to be quite tight. What that means is that Warren is selling his reaction just above his shoulders, which means he's only working on a head turn, which we'll be discussing in a second, the different reactions you can do just with your head. If he was doing that with his shoulder and upper body, we would lose him out of frame. What does that mean? So let's put him back in position. So let's say I was throwing a punch from the other side and I want my partner to fall out of frame. So all he needs to do is, instead of just doing a head reaction, he can just drop down after the head reaction with his shoulders. So he's suddenly out of frame. So if we're selling that reaction here right now at full speed, he's now out of frame with reaction, which we can see in these other angles here again. But let's say if I don't want him to fall out of frame, and we use the punch from before, and instead of just using his head reaction, he uses head and shoulders, he'll ruin the shot, and that's what we don't want. And let's have a look also how that looks. So it would look like this. So now he fell through shot, he fell through, if I was the actor, he fell through the hero's acting part after the shot, so he would have ruined the shot. So it's really important to discuss beforehand what reactions are we looking for. Are we in a tight shot where I need small reactions, or are we in a wide shot where my reactions can be quite big? And with my reactions, do I want to cross the lens, or do I want to stay on the same side of the lens? Because one thing that could be done here as well is, they said I could get Warren to fall out of shot without crossing the lens. Which means if I was doing the same punch, he could have received it just around the shoulders, but he could have dropped straight down out of shot. It would look like this. And like that, he's not crossing the lens, but he's falling out of shot. There's a lot of different reactions we can work on, and we're going to go to some of them in a second. But the first and most important thing is safety, which means always work on your distance first. And if you're not seeing the markings on the floor, mark up the floor so you know you're always standing in the same distance. If the action includes steps, that's a whole nother level that we're going to discuss in a different chapter. A few things can happen even after you checked your safety distance. Sometimes people tend to lean in when they're performing their punch. What does it mean? Well, I've done my distance, I'm good here, I know I can't connect to my partner, We've rehearsed it at half speed, we've rehearsed it at full speed, we're good. Now the director calls action. Something changes, the adrenaline kicks in, they call action, you want to do it really well, and the one thing you do is you don't necessarily step forward, but you lean into your punch. So I lean with my upper body forward, and now I'm suddenly connecting with my partner. I'm actually touching their chin. What's really important here is obviously to not change my action at all. That means not just not stepping, but also means not leaning with my body. Here, totally safe. If I start leaning because I'm putting the extra energy in, I'm suddenly connecting with my partner's face. I'm too close. Same is for my partner too. I might not be moving, but they might decide to lean in. So suddenly I'm here, but because he's leaning in, I'm touching his face as well. So, work out the action. I said, if it requires leaning in, if your upper body action does require leaning in, well then I have to account for that as I'm establishing the distance between me and my partner. So let's say my partner was meant to step into this position, that will mark the safe position, and then we'll step one step back. And the same is for me. Let's say if I had to throw the punch stepping into my mark, then I'm gonna step one step back, my partner is gonna step one step back. And now when the director calls action, we can both move into our spots and still throw safely with a good connect.